Hi everyone, welcome. I think we've actually got a couple more people to join us, but we might start anyway, given it's already gone past 4 o'clock. I'm hoping people have had the opportunity to use Teams before. It should be fairly easy for you to use. Your controls should sit in the middle of your screen or off to the bottom on the right-hand side. That'll include a button for you to mute your microphone. And also to share video if you want to do that. You don't need to, but if you want to do that, you certainly can. And there's also a chat box, a little text box, which will enable you to ask any questions or write any comments on the way through. I'll keep a close eye on those during the presentation, and very happy for you to ask questions on the way through. I'm actually going to introduce firstly Steve Jones and ask Steve just to say hello to everybody and give us a brief introduction, a little bit of background information. So, Steve, welcome. I'm hoping you can see and hear Steve and the slides.
No worries. Thanks, Craig. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. Obviously, different times, and having a launch event online is different to normal, but I'm sure you'll get some great insights from today's session. Most of you know me pretty well. My name is Stephen Jones. I'm one of the partners of ATM Consultants, and along with Graham Ewart, and as an accounting practice, we've been going since 1993. I want to thank for joining us today, and you'll hear from Craig shortly. And as I say, I'm sure you'll get plenty out of his presentation. I just thought I'd take a minute or two to let you know how we came to be involved with Succession Plus. So to put it in perspective, Graham and I are no spring chickens, and many of our clients have been with us for a long time. A few years ago, we decided to offer financial planning to help our clients work their way towards retirement. And in more recent times, we've expanded that into family succession and estate planning strategies. For most, we found their retirement and estate planning is closely linked to what they're going to do with their business. And as a result, we've been working with a few clients over the last year or two in helping them to look to sell their business or transfer it effectively to the next generation in their families. So we realise this is an area that's going to impact a lot of our clients over the next few years. I then had the pleasure of hearing Craig speak at a seminar, and what Craig said resonated with me and covered a number of areas that we've been talking about with our clients. So I contacted Craig later for some information, and we started to look at what Succession Plus do, and I've never seen a better offering in terms of business succession strategies, and no doubt that is because they are specialists in this area and have been doing it for so long. The other thing I found was Craig shares a lot of the same business philosophies as we do, and probably always amazed me. He quotes the same people I do in Gerber and Covey and Buffett, and probably even shares my view on Jimmy Barnes' singing voice, as I discovered earlier on in the year, but that's a different story. But he's developed a very well-structured program to help people get the most out of their business succession strategies. It's very comprehensive. It opens up more possibilities for our clients. If you want to sell your business, you want to transfer it to family, you want to transfer it to your employees, maybe you want to keep the business going but have less day-to-day involvement, that's all covered. And we realise this is a perfect fit for our business. We also realise that there are many businesses out there who, just like our clients, are crying out for this type of assistance. So one thing led to another, and we've become accredited advisors for Succession Plus in Victoria. The other thing I wanted to talk about today a little bit is just the date for this launch. It's been interesting because we picked this date a couple of months ago, and of course that was before we all went into lockdown. And whilst it's meant we have to do this online rather than as an actual event, the date, I think, in some regards has turned out to be quite appropriate. So it's obviously saved us a few bob in drinks and nibbles and so on, but apart from that, I think the timing's probably right. Like many others, we're working from home at the moment, and I know in our accounting practice we've had the busiest few weeks we've probably ever had. And it's going to be a big week for our client managers, making sure everyone who qualifies is set up under the JobKeeper package. And we had a pretty detailed meeting about the process for that this morning. But over the journey of the last 27 years, we've sometimes had to drop everything and help a client who is facing a crisis. But at the moment, pretty much all of our clients are facing a crisis and all need our help at the same time. So it's been pretty busy times. But the reality is the various support packages are starting to kick in, and businesses have been putting plans in place to survive. And I think once the JobKeeper applications go in, things will settle a little bit more. And then I think it will be a great time for businesses to start to have a look at the longer term. More strategic thinking in terms of how we do want business to look in the future. And there's no doubt it's going to be different. There's no doubt about that, which means it's a great opportunity to start with a relatively clean slate and design it how we want. And the program Craig is going to tell us about today is a great tool to provide the framework to do that. So on that note, Craig, I'm going to hand back to you to talk a little bit about the Succession Plus offering. So here's to Craig West.
Thanks very much, Steve. And let me just say we're welcoming you aboard. It's great to have you guys on board. I think it's fair to say that business owners working through succession and exit planning, it's a fairly significant major event for business owners and their families and the business and their stakeholders, employees, suppliers, customers, etc. And they need a trusted hand with them to help them through that process. So what I thought I'd do today is give you a bit of an overview around what we do and how we approach business succession and exit planning, some of the key things for business owners to think about and also for advisors to think about, because one of the things you'll see very quickly is this is a very collaborative space. It's not a space where either we or Steve and the firm can provide everything that's needed. We often need to work with other advisors. Generally speaking, that includes financial planners, often lawyers, sometimes banks, sometimes marketing people, business coaches, and other advisors. So it's quite a collaborative project. And that's important to understand as well, because in reality, importantly, it is a project. It's a process and there's a fair bit involved in actually making it happen. It's not going to happen quickly or easily. But the ultimate outcome for us is to work with clients to maximise the value of the business and achieve a successful exit. And an exit takes many different forms. There could be many different types of exits, from the simple ones where you might be handing the business on to your children, if it's a family-owned business, or it might be far more complicated where you're implementing, a private equity firm might be buying equity, you might be listing the business and all sorts of other things. So importantly for us, it's not our job to decide which exit, it's our job to help you get the exit that you want. Before I start, it's worth just understanding exactly what succession and exit planning actually means, because a lot of people talk about succession planning, but it's good to know, what is it? And for me, and for the way that we approach it, it's about getting three things right at the same time. The first thing is the business itself. The business needs to be ready. And that means the financials of the business, it means the people, it means the management structures, the organisation, the corporate governance, etc. Financially, the owners need to be ready. Now that is partly business, but it's also partly personal. So it means that the business needs to work well, it needs to make money, it needs to build up equity, but it also needs to provide for the owners with dividends. Maybe they've purchased other assets. It's about structuring those assets, working out who should own what assets and how, and also getting clear on the personal goals as well, making sure the business owner knows what they're looking to do after the business, or after exit, if you like. So a couple of things, and Steve's already mentioned, apart from completely disliking Jimmy Barnes' singing voice, we do quote the same things. I often talk about beginning with the end in mind with Steve Covey, and really understanding where it is that you're headed with your business. What is it that you're looking to do with your business over time? And the other one is Michael Gerber. And Michael Gerber talks about an exit strategy is the ball game for any entrepreneur. And again, it doesn't matter which strategy. It doesn't matter whether you're passing on to your family or merging or selling, but there has to be a strategy. And in my view, the earlier that strategy is designed and we start to implement it, the better outcome that you're going to get over a period of time. The key thing there, as I said, strategy takes time. Good strategy takes good time. If you rush this, or you try and do it too late, leave it too late, as some business owners often do, then you'll reduce the options that are available to you, which may well reduce the outcome. Unfortunately, in Australia, we've got some pretty bad statistics around succession and exit planning. The first one is 55% of all business exits are some kind of failure. Now, they could be death or disability or some kind of serious illness or something like that, but there's also financial issues, often causes the case. maybe a partnership dispute, or even a family separation or divorce, etc. None of those are where we want to end up. And so planning is critical to make sure we can avoid some of those outcomes on the way through. The way that we actually do that is through this 21-step process. And you'll see it's a process. I used that word before. It's a journey. It's not something that's going to happen quickly or easily. There are a number of things that need to be done. And you'll see as you go through these, some of these are around the owners and their goals. Some of them are around the business and preparing the business. Some of them are around the financial position of the owners and the family. And others are more focused around actual preparation for a transaction or exit when we get down to sort of steps 16 and 17. Key thing is there is a process. It's a logical, step-by-step process, 21 steps in order. If you work through it, you should be able to maximise the value of your business and successfully exit at the other end. I'm going to talk through some of those steps and some of those stages just to give you a bit of an idea of what's involved, and perhaps to get you to think about some of the things that are important around succession and exit planning on the way through. The first place to start really is two things. Where do we want to get to? And that's goals and outcomes. And where are we starting from? What have we actually got today? And so it's about really having a conversation with you, with your family, with the other owners to determine what it is they're looking to achieve. What is it that you're hoping to get from the business? Are you looking to sell it? Are you looking to pass it on? Are you looking to extract cash from it? Do you want to keep working in it? Or do you want to retire and move on and do something else? All of those things are valid, but it's really about getting that conversation happening and making sure everybody involved with the business is clear on what that actually looks like. Some of the key questions are around timing, funding, and importantly, what you're going to do after you exit the business. A lot of business owners underestimate dramatically how much time is left after the exit. And for most business owners today, that could be 15 or 20 years after exit that you are retired, but still need funding, still need something to do, still need to be occupied and busy, etc. The next thing we need to do is really get clear on the business itself. What's in the business? What is it worth? What are their issues? What are the strengths and opportunities within the business so we can maximise value and get you closer to your chosen exit strategy, whatever that might be. Now, there's a couple of key parts to this. The first one is a financial analysis, obviously. Steve's background in accounting is very similar to mine. We take a financial view of the business. We look at profitability. We look at working capital, asset turnover, and efficiency within the business to get a view as to what the value might be. As importantly, are non-financial aspects as well. How is the business managed? Is the business dependent on you as the owner? Do you have a strategic plan in place? Have you got key people around you that can help you manage and run the business? How is it organised financially? And lastly, how ready is it for a sale or exit? If you're going to pass it on to your children, are they in a position where they're able to take over and run that business for you? Or is that going to cause a problem? Have you got a marketing plan in place? Have you got a board? Do you need an external director to sit on your board? Is your business model adapting to changing environments? And we're right in the middle of probably the biggest change in a business environment certainly I've ever seen. And so are you adapting to that business change? Are you keeping up to date with what's happening in the real world outside your business? To do all of that, we start with what's called a business insights report. And I recommend that every single client that we work with starts at this point, even if you're not sure what your exit strategy will look like or could look like. This report gives you an overview of exactly what you've got. How is the business rated? How does it perform financially? How does it compare with industry averages and benchmarks? And how ready is it and you for some kind of exit or succession planning approach? We use a series of graphical scorecards. So the first one is financial, and you'll see a whole stack of financial metrics there. But importantly, red crosses for metrics where you haven't met the target, orange where you're not quite there, and green where you're okay. Those things will help us highlight and identify areas of over or underperformance. Where do we need to focus attention going forward to improve the performance of the business? As importantly, as I said, whilst my background and obviously Steve's is heavily financial, we also understand that businesses importantly depend on the non-financial aspects. Right at the top left-hand side, key person dependence. How dependent is the business on you? How dependent is the business on other management team? Have you got key people around you? On the left-hand side, have we got all our policies and procedures documented? Do we have key person risk within the business? Is there a shareholders agreement? Whole stack of questions that need to be answered around the management and risk profile of the business. And risk's really important because it directly impacts the valuation. Then we look at the business from a buyer's perspective. How ready is the business for sale or exit? And how attractive is it to a buyer? Does it have strategic value? Does it have a growth pattern and a growth plan going forward? Is there a succession strategy in place for people? Have our people got incentive plans? All of those things factor into how attractive that business might be to a particular buyer. And that will, of course, affect the price. Then we benchmark the business. We compare it with competitors and we look at it and see whether it's over or underperforming. Is the business paying more or less in rent? Is the business got better or worse cost of goods sold? Where are we able to perhaps reduce costs or improve performance? Because that's an important part of preparation. And we're doing all of this, don't forget, to get a very clear picture of what the business looks like today and what possible actions we should take in the future to improve that. We then identify a profit gap. Have we got the ability to improve our profit? In this example, there is a profit gap and it's quite substantial. We're talking more than $250,000. Excuse me. And so we've identified already a couple of key things we can improve in the business that will already add value. This slide's important because it shows us where the business is today. In this example, on the left-hand side, we valued the business at $7.12 million. But by identifying through the insights reports where those profit gaps are, where those improvements could be made compared to the benchmarking, and how we can improve the attractiveness, sale readiness, and strategic value of the business. And in this example, in fact, we're actually doubling completely the value of the business over a period of time. That outline makes it really attractive for clients to follow this process, because what we're showing you here is the ability to grow the value of the business from 7 million to 15. Now, clearly, that's not going to happen in a week or a month or even a year. It's going to take a period of time, but we are dramatically improving the value of that asset over time. The way that we do that is to design an implementation plan, a map that shows you all of the steps, and you can see them all there. It's mapped out over about 18 months, all of the things that need to be managed, improved or addressed within the business, either to maximise value or reduce risk or improve performance. And sometimes all of those things can take place with each of these steps. This is the same 21 steps I showed you before, but we're just walking through that one by one to map out where we're up to and what needs to be done next. Obviously, red, critical, urgent and important. Orange should be done fairly soon to make sure we're protecting assets. And later on, we get into the green, value-added material. Once we've done that initial review, it's really important to press the pause button and make sure we've got protection around the existing structures in the business. Firstly, a financial planning conversation. Now, to clarify, that's not a conversation about which shares you should buy or when. It's a strategic conversation around structuring. How much money do you need to retire? What about taxation? What about self-managed super? How do you want your estate planned? Have you got investments? Who owns those investments? Are you going to keep them or sell them as part of the business? Sometimes we get business owners that want to sell the business but keep the building, or the other way around. And so all of that becomes part of a strategic financial plan that goes with our succession plan. The next thing is to think about risk. All businesses have risk. You can't get rid of it. You can minimize it and you can plan for it. And so this is about actually using structures to quarantine risk, to try and protect our assets as much as possible from business risk, to make sure we're using and protecting those assets in the best possible way. Then the question that nobody likes to talk about: what happens if you get hit by a bus? What happens if an unplanned event occurs before you get to your ultimate exit strategy? This is around creating certainty for you, for your family, for other shareholders, for your estate, if that's the case, to make sure we've got documents in place and people understand what the intention is and what's meant to happen if something goes wrong on the way through. De-risking. Now, I talked before about profit and attractiveness of the business. The other side of the equation is risk. And we're seeing at the moment, in the middle of COVID-19, a whole stack of different strategies all around reducing risk. Social distancing is a risk mitigation strategy. We can do the same thing with our business. We can look at all of the business aspects, find out where the higher risk items lie, and put in place strategies to minimise that risk. You can't really ever get rid of it, but you can certainly minimise it and manage it going forward. The key thing around risk is this: the higher the risk, the lower the valuation multiple, and that's true of any investment asset. So one of the key things for business owners to understand is when we reduce risk in a business, we improve our value. Most business owners, because they're entrepreneurial and growth focused, are not thinking about risk, they're thinking about growth. How do I add more profit? How do I build more sales? And those things are valuable and important, but reducing risk is equally important. Then we get to the far more exciting part. How do we maximise the value of our business before we get to an exit? And there are quite a few steps in this process. I'll walk through them and we'll have a chat about what they actually look like. The first place to start, and I started with a quote around begin with the end in mind, and this is important. What is our exit option? Which option suits us, our family, our financial position, and our business? How do we combine those things to come up with what is the best possible exit option? And there's two important points here. Bottom left-hand side is cheap and nasty, low value, pass it on to family and friends. Not that you should call that cheap and nasty, but it very rarely maximises the value of the asset. But it is simple, it's fairly cheap, it's fairly easy to do, it's often quick, etc. As we go up and to the right, they become more complicated. There's more time involved and more costs. And of course, if you look at things like an IPO or private equity, many business owners that we work with are never going to be in that position. The company's not big enough or they're not ready to do that. In the middle of this diagram, somewhere between partial sale and strategic sale, sits a whole stack of exit options that are quite valuable for private businesses. Working out which one is the best one and whether in fact you should do one or two rather than just one. Perhaps you might do an employee share plan to lock in your key people and then in a couple of years' time sell to a competitor in a trade sale. So you're putting two exit strategies together to maximise the value of the business. That decision and the planning that goes around that is very important to get done early. Importantly, everything that we do around exit planning is around this. How do I maximise the equity value of my business? Profits are important. This is a very old quote. Profits are important and you should definitely make money. That nobody on earth should be telling you not to make money in your business. But you have to think about how do you build equity value of your business as well. What is it you can do to make your business more valuable? To do that, you need to have a strategic plan. Now, this is not a business plan document that you might write to get a loan from the bank or that you might write when you do an MBA at uni. This is a strategic business plan. It's not a long document, it's quite short, but it's very clear on what the business needs to look like for you to achieve your exit. If, for example, you decided you wanted to sell your business in 10 years' time, when you turn 65 in 2030 for $10 million, then we know what that business needs to look like. We know what it needs to turn over, we know how much money it needs to make, we know what multiple we can get as long as we manage the risk, etc. And so we can design a business plan that actually delivers that. Importantly, that's got to be coupled with a financial plan as well. Strategic financial plan for the business that maps out what does the business look like in 2030 for me to get somebody to write a check for $10 million. Because the reality is most business owners go at this backwards. They get to 2030, realise they've only made $800,000 profit and they've got a whole stack of unmanaged risks and therefore nobody's going to write you a check for $10 million. This is about working strategically towards that end game with a plan and a financial strategy. The financial strategy could be as simple as this one-page outline. What does our monthly profit and loss look like? What does our cash flow need to look like? You'll see on the right-hand side there, there's some non-financial KPIs around lost time due to injuries, accidents, workplace health and safety, average sale value, customer conversion rates, all the key things that are going to be important in your business to make sure it is actually worth $10 million at the time. And then systems. Most business owners hate this, hate spending the time to do it, but love the outcome. Save yourself time, effort and money. It's an old saying, it's pretty boring, but it's really effective in improving the performance of the business and increasing efficiency and therefore value. Most businesses know this and understand this. Many haven't taken the time and effort to make it happen. If you want some examples, certainly if you haven't read the E-Myth, I'd strongly recommend you read it. It's about small businesses and documenting their systems and process. If If you don't want to read the book, you can certainly look at the Founder movie, which talks about McDonald's and how much time they spent designing and documenting the way that that business operates. It's certainly worth investing the time and effort in your business to make this happen. The next one that's equally important, and I do think people are spending more time on this, but certainly from our experience, buyers are spending a lot more time on it as well, is marketing and sales. Is your marketing and sales the old-fashioned, dependent upon the owner's network type model, or is it a funnel? Have you got a marketing and sales machine that operates even when you're in bed at night, there's new leads coming in? Social media, branding, website, CRM are all working together to generate new leads for the business. The reason that's important is that's what buyers are looking for. Buyers are not looking for a business that relies on you to make every single sale that you sell. It's about having a system and a process and a machine sitting there generating leads and sales for you. Corporate governance. How do we put a structure around you and your management team to make sure there's some compliance and governance and risk management, but also some strategic direction? This is about having a board in place, possibly if you're the right size, having a non-executive external director sitting in place to make sure that we can actually manage the issues within the business, and as the name says, govern the business as if it was a corporation rather than as if it was a small privately owned business. And that makes a big difference. It makes a big difference for the owners, but also to the valuation. How do we get in place business advisors, a family council, some board directors if we need them, and some processes and documents around who's got the right to make which decisions? What authority does the managers have? What authority do you have as the CEO or managing partner or founder? And what authority do you need to take to the board to get approved? Often businesses have that in place, but it's very, very informal. This is about documenting and structuring that so that it works to protect everybody. The next one is around our people. And there is not a better time than to talk about people within a business than right now. Most of us have got teams of people working at home remotely. They're not connected to each other every day face to face or in an office or where they're talking. And so this becomes quite an issue. It's about getting employees to think and act like business owners. How do we know that our employees are as focused as we are on driving performance of the business? We actually work with a lot of clients on this step and the next one, employee share plans, as separate projects to improve the performance of the business prior to working on a succession strategy. Ownership mindset's about getting 3 or 4 things right. The first one is the right people. So how do we get the right personnel in the right roles? How do we give them the right knowledge, training and education around how the business performs? Not around the technical aspects of how to do their job, not about teaching an accountant more about tax or teaching an architect more about design. It's more about teaching the accountant and the architect how the business they work in operates and makes money. And then some systems. How do we measure and forecast performance? What KPIs do we actually measure to drive performance? And lastly, how do we design an incentive plan that rewards our people for achieving that level of performance? You've heard me speak before probably about an employee share plan, and certainly there's a lot of material on our website and books that we've published, etc. And if you're interested in that, obviously Steve's got access to all of that material as well. But really, we're finding a lot of interest at the moment in the employee share ownership plan, either as part of a strategy to sell business to employees or as a separate strategy altogether to keep in place employees. Make sure they're motivated, make sure they're focused on what we're doing and working with us to drive the value of the business. We often use them as a profit share fund. We use them to purchase shares in the business and, importantly, to lock in employees and improve performance over a period of time. The next one is about management succession. If you're going to leave the business at some point in time, obviously someone needs to run that business for you. The business is not going to run itself. There are very few businesses that will do that. You need to actually plan the management succession. We talked before about the ownership succession and selling equity and employee share plans. This is about who's managing the business and how well prepared are they for that role over time. It's about identifying the right candidates, mapping out the skills. That this is a very abbreviated list, but you get the idea. Mapping out who's got the right skills, who's got the right technical knowledge. Are there some licenses or qualifications that people need to have in order to take on that role. And if they don't have them today, that's okay, but we need a training plan to make sure they get to them within a period of time. Then we get to the more exciting stuff. How do we actually extract value from our business? The first place to start is tax, and I'm not going to go through the detailed tax breakdown. That's obviously an area of expertise of Steve and the team, but certainly it's important to understand how tax will impact your exit. If you sell or if you pass on the family or you employee share plan, they all have different tax consequences. So it's quite important to understand all of that and the other costs that are involved. Then documentation. How do we document the business? And there's two aspects to this. One piece of documentation is around preparing an IM document. How do we prepare the business for sale? What information do we put together? The other important aspect is to make sure we put together the due diligence documentation, to make sure that we have everything in place to make sure that the buyer can come in and look at the business with some confidence around the documents that we're offering. Most due diligence processes are detailed. There's a lot of information required, and typically most business owners are not ready for this stage. There's a lot of work to do here to get ready. And so it's worth talking to people early about getting these documents together. Then the transaction. Now, the key thing that we're looking for in most cases is, how do we make a strategic sale? How can we find somebody to buy our business who will typically pay more than the average buyer? And this is about finding, in an ideal world, we want to look at either listed companies or offshore buyers. They will nearly always pay more, but it's about a strategic buyer, not a financial buyer who's looking for a simple profit and financial return. We want a strategic buyer for whom this acquisition makes strategic sense and adds significant value. Again, Steve mentioned this at the start. I often quote Warren Buffett. I love this quote: price is what you pay, value is what you get. It is quite often that you'll see, particularly if you look at businesses like Apple make acquisitions regularly, many during a year. That it's nothing for them to make 20 acquisitions in one calendar year. They're always strategic. So they're not buying things that they think will make them good money. They already make plenty of money, but they're buying things where they're buying businesses that have fantastic headphones. They bought business several years ago that had fantastic voice recognition technology. They've now turned that into Siri, and it's on every product they sell. And so it's about finding strategic value in acquisitions. Now, most businesses we work with are valuable strategically to someone else. You have to think about who that is and how you attract them. That will actually have a massive effect on the value of your business when you sell. Lastly, we've sold the business. Hopefully, we've successfully extracted our cash. What are we going to do now? Because we're no longer in a position where we're going to earn any money. Now, when you own a business, typically, if you need money, you take it out of the business. If the business needs money, you put it in. That stops. The day you sell, you can no longer do that. Now, it's about how do you make sure that the money that you've extracted is invested and protected for what could be 15 or 20 years. How do we protect our assets? We've now got a different asset protection problem to what we had as a business owner. We might have a blended family, we might have been divorced, we've got children from a previous marriage, etc. All of that is pretty common now, but it all needs to be protected. It needs to be documented so we get certainty that our assets are actually protected if something goes wrong. And lastly, obviously, no one likes to think about this, but at some point, we're all going to need a will. We all need enduring powers of attorney, and we all need to think about what we're going to do with the assets that we've built up. We are seeing now, obviously, lots of clients in a position where when they haven't had an enduring power of attorney, which if you speak to any lawyer is not a ridiculously complicated or expensive document, but it's a document that protects you if you are mentally incapable of making a decision or signing a document or doing something that's required. Often we see that with clients as they're getting older with things like Alzheimer's and dementia, etc. So that's something to consider in terms of preparation over the period. I'm happy to pause now and stop talking, firstly, but secondly, just ask for any questions. Now, if you do have questions, there should be a little chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. I'm keeping a close eye on that. So if there are any questions, please just type them in and I will make sure we answer those as we go. Obviously, if you're either not able to type them in at the moment or you wanted to talk separately to Steve afterwards, very happy to answer questions later on as well. I'll just pause for a second, see if there are any questions at the moment. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions come in, but as I said, I'm very happy to answer those afterwards, and I'm sure Steve will be as well, either online in this forum, we'll leave it open for a little while once we finish, but also separately later on, either by email or phone or whatever else, if you do have questions. If you do have questions now and you want to unmute your microphone and ask them out loud, I'm happy to do that as well if that works for people, whatever suits.
Craig, we have a few people who talking about moving their business onto their family.
Yes.
What about using that employee share plan arrangement to help the funding of that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Steve. So we do see often people are looking at moving the business into the family or moving it onto, you know, sons, grandsons, daughters, family, cousins, whatever. I've got a family transition at the moment in Sydney where we're passing the business from mum and dad on to 8 different people, 2 generations and in fact cousins as well. So it's quite complicated. The employee share plan model that Steve mentioned a moment ago is actually quite relevant for two main reasons. Firstly, funding. Often you'll get a situation where family members have got different financial, particularly when you're dealing with 2 generations, you're generally going to have people that have different financial capacity. And so it might not be that all family members can write out a cheque for $250,000 or $500,000 or whatever it might be at the time. The employee share plan allows that to happen over a period of time. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that in an employee share plan, there are a stack of different rules and regulations we can put in around entry, exit, valuation, payment and funding that are much easier to manage inside an employee share plan and mean everybody that's involved in the process are operating under the same rules. So we haven't got different people in different arrangements, different deals, different payments, funding, timing. It's all coordinated together. And if that's the case, an employee share plan can be quite an effective way to manage the transaction, either to your employees who may not be family members or internally to other family members. And sometimes we're actually working with a couple of family businesses now where for the first time in one of them for more than 100 years, the next CEO won't be a family member. And so they're actually using an employee share plan just for that person to make sure they've got equity in the business and they're incentivised the same way the family is. Obviously, the family already being shareholders and owners are already incentivised, but this new CEO coming in who's not a family member is now going in through an employee share plan, which then helps him and make sure that he's got the same incentive and the same reward structure and KPIs as the family owners. It's quite a valid option to have a look at. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any come up online, but if people want to ask other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Okay, we might leave that for now. There's no current questions coming in. Steve, I might just ask you to just outline a little bit of work around ATM and how you're working with clients and how that might work going forward.
Yeah, well, I think I mentioned earlier, Craig, I think this is a great fit for our business. And from our perspective, when we add our existing skills in accounting, tax, financial and estate planning, add to that our network of specialist advisors we already have, it means we can take people on the journey from getting the most out of your business, investing it wisely to fund your lifestyle, and then effectively passing it on to the next generation. And we can do that a couple of ways. I think particularly for our clients, we can do that from end to end, but also if you've got other people who have other advisors that you like to work with, for example, your solicitor or your financial planner or something like that, we're happy to do that as well. So we can coordinate the strategy and we can use your advisors to implement, and we can just then fill in the gaps where needed.
Yeah, fantastic. So I think, look, obviously Steve's contact details are now on the screen. I'm also happy to answer any questions both now, but I do understand if people want to ask questions privately, Steve's number and email address are on the screen. I'm happy to answer questions as well, but if you direct them through Steve, he should be able to answer them for you. If not, I'm happy to get involved down the track as we work together. I hope today's been useful and interesting and informative. I hope you've learned something about succession and exit planning. And if we can help you, and I'm certain we can, please reach out to Steve, say hello and ask any questions, and I'm sure we can work away to help you maximise the value of your business and hopefully down the track achieve a successful exit.
Well, thank you everyone. I know it's not quite the same online. I appreciate you joining us. Thank you to Craig, very informative talk. I'm sure people have got a lot from that. So if anyone wants to know more from today, as Craig said, feel free to get in touch with me and I can let you know what you need to do to get started on that business succession journey.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everyone.